Hi again. What a gorgeous day we have. What a beautiful day we have. I am so grateful that we are able to get outside every once in a while and just enjoy life. This has been such a difficult time for us, I know, and to be outside in God's creation is such a wonderful place to be. That's one of the ways that I have been challenging myself to do some self-care. One of the things that's really, really important during this time is that we are doing things for self-care, taking care of ourselves, making sure that we are doing okay. And one of the things that they've said to do is to get outside, to walk, and to do what we can to get out of the homes that we find ourselves kind of cloistered in. And so I hope that you are doing that. But, I wanted to share with you another way that I have been practicing self-care, because a lot of people have been asking me, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? Well, one of the things that I have been trying to do is to get in touch with other pastors. And when I sit on Zoom with other pastors and we share kind of what's going on in our lives and everything, there's something very healing about that. And we hold each other accountable for making sure we're doing okay. Well, the other day I was on a Zoom call with several other pastors, and they asked me how I was doing. Well, actually, we asked each other. But when I responded to that question, an I, a picture came to my mind, a story in Scripture came to my mind. It's one that has always been important to me, but now, during this time, there were certain aspects of the story that, I don't know, took a more prominent place. The story is from Matthew chapter 14, and it was right after Jesus had just fed the multitude. After he had fed the 5,000, he told his disciples to go on ahead, to take a boat and go ahead to the other side of the lake, and that he would join them. So then Jesus goes and he dismisses the crowd, and then he goes up to the mountain by himself to pray, and he's alone in that moment. But while he's alone, the disciples are out on the lake, and a storm begins to rise up. And this is what happened. When evening came, Jesus was there alone, but by this time the boat with the disciples is battered by the waves and was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, Jesus came walking towards them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered Jesus, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said to him, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water and came towards Jesus. But when Peter noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and he began to sink. And so he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand, caught him, and saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those who were in the boat worshiped Jesus, saying, "Truly, this is the Son of God." Now, as I said, that's been a passage that I've looked at often, and it's been one that talks about the courage of Peter to be able to step out of the boat, and that's been something that has encouraged me. What gives me that faith to step out of the boat, to step out of my comfort zone? But this time, as I was looking at this passage, the way it spoke to me this time was this idea that, I find myself in this boat, in this place that feels safe, even though all around me is a storm. And yet Jesus was calling me to take a risk, to do something different. And what I feel like is, I've tried to do that. I've tried to do different things. I've tried to, we moved into this recording of our worship services, recording of devotionals. We're trying to find ways in which we can connect with one another. And I get out of the boat, and then I find myself, just like in the story, sinking. And you see, that's what happened when those pastors said to me, "How are you doing?" I said, "I feel like I'm sinking sometimes. I feel like I'm sinking." Maybe you felt that way too, like you're sinking. in the midst of all that's going on, there's this storm raging about you. You've tried to trust, you've tried to have faith, and yet you feel like you're sinking. In that moment of sharing with those pastors, what I realized was when I am sinking, I need to say, I need to cry out, I need to shout, I need to be as bold as I can in my prayers and say, Lord, I'm sinking. Save me. And when I've done that, each and every time, maybe not in my time or maybe not in my way, but each and every time, I feel as if God is grabbing a hold of me and he's pulling me back up to the surface and he's reminding me that I need to have faith. But here's what's interesting. In that story, Peter and Jesus get back in the boat right after that first sinking experience. I'll be honest with you. I haven't been invited back into the boat yet. And those waters, see how they're so calm here? Those waters are still raging. And what I'm finding is what Jesus is doing to me in this moment is he's pulling me up and he's saying, you've got to have faith, but then he's letting me go to try it again, to try to walk on water again, to try to get through this again with faith, with my eyes fixed on him again. And each time I begin to sink again. But each time when I'm smart enough to call out for help, Jesus pulls me up again and reminds me of that faith that I need. So here's the thing. One day this will be past us. And we will be invited back into the boat. And we will experience a time of calm and comfort. But right now, we're still in the storm. And we can stay in that boat and not risk anything, or we can get out of the boat. But either way, God's going to be with us. So my encouragement to you is do not be afraid to cry out for help. Do not be afraid to ask God to bring you a sense of relief and comfort. Do not be afraid, but also do not expect that means everything's going to be perfect once again. Because for whatever reason, Jesus is calling us to that long journey in the midst of this storm. So I'm praying for you, and I hope that you're praying for me. And let us together, when we find ourselves sinking, to not be so arrogant and pretend that that's not affecting us, but let us all, in those moments, cry out for help. Because I believe firmly that the hand of Jesus will be there to pull us up. Thanks so much for listening.